Hello, you. What's going on here? So happy Ada Lovelace Day. Got a bit of a thing for Ada Lovelace, if I'm honest, even though she's 200 odd years old. She's dead. But anyway, so I've used Ada Lovelace in lessons quite a bit. The fact that she's so kind of instrumental in the sort of history of computing, and the fact that she's a she, I've capitalised on that quite a bit. I've never had a class where I've talked about Ada Lovelace and there haven't been some gasps from the kids, not just girls actually, and I've often focused on the fact that technically she wrote the first ever computer program, and she wrote the first ever computer program decades before the first computer existed.
She published the first computer program as long ago as 1843.
Now, how amazing is she? And that's led into usually quite a healthy class discussion about computing and women and STEM and the kind of the misrepresentation or the underrepresentation of women in that field. And so yeah, happy to do something for Ada Lovelace Day. And the thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about computational thinking, because computational thinking is something that pretty much anybody who teaches computing is going to have to cover. The sooner you cover it, the better, in my opinion. I've written in the past about how, for me, teaching computational thinking and teaching logic is more important than teaching coding. Not that we shouldn't be teaching coding, but that, particularly for younger kids, teaching the logical thinking is more important, and that it leads into coding later on quite neatly, but it's way more important. So anyway, I'm going to take you through some of the things that I have used in the lessons that I've done on computational thinking. Some of them might be useful, some of them might not. Yeah. So as a lead-in to teaching the concept of computational thinking, of thinking logically, because ultimately computational thinking is just thinking logically. What I would do is I would put this photo up on the board, and I would give the class a minute, 2 minutes to have a think about the question I'm about to ask you. Allow them to discuss it maybe with the person next to them, that sort of thing, and then poll the class for some answers. So the question that I would ask is, how fast would you need to run to get away from this bear? And I'll give them a minute or two to stew on it, and invariably you would get quite a range of answers. One of the answers you would get is really fast. You'd have some students will always try and throw a speed at you. They'll go 30 miles an hour. So there'll be at least one, I would think, that generally speaking was always one, because of course there's always one, would speculate on how fast a bear can run, and then start to kind of extrapolate. Well, I reckon a brown bear could probably run at 5 miles an hour, so you'd need to run at 6 or 7 miles an hour to outrun it, 10 to get a comfortable lead. And the answer, of course, is faster than this guy, this guy, this guy, or this guy. And that would annoy some of them, because they'd be like, oh, what a rip. But of course, although it's a sort of joke, that basically you just need to run faster than somebody else so they get eaten instead of you, and you can make your retreat. What you're doing is you're looking at a problem, escaping from this bear, and thinking about that problem logically. And that was always how I would lead into the idea of talking about computational thinking. And also, for my money, what that does is it takes the term computational thinking, which sounds kind of dry and boring and hard, and gives it a sort of light-hearted slant. It kind of breaks them into the idea of what it is, but it also breaks them in the sense that they think, oh, you know what, actually that was sort of alright as a starter, maybe this whole topic is going to be okay. It's also worth noting that this photo is a fake and that the bear was added afterwards. So it's quite a useful tool if you want to teach the students about not believing everything they see online, or about how computer software can be used to manipulate images. So the next thing I would do is I would get a student up to the front of the room and I would hand them a dictionary, and I would explain to them that they already understand computational thinking and thinking about things logically, and they already do it. They just don't necessarily know that they do it, which blows their minds to begin with. And so I would say to them, I'm going to prove to you in 10 seconds that you already think logically, that you already think computationally. So I'd hand them the dictionary and I'd say to them, right, think of a word that begins with, make it look like you're picking a letter at random, but it's always M or N, because it's in the middle. And you hand them the dictionary and you go, right, find the word and tell me what it means. And they'll pick things like mother or machine or monkey or something along those lines. It really doesn't matter. Can't think of any other words that begin with them that would cause you any problems. And invariably, and I've got to be honest, I have never ever ever done this and it hasn't worked. So yeah. But first time for everything, right? So invariably what they will do is this. They will hold the dictionary in their hands, they will flip it roughly to the middle to where the M's are likely to be, and then they'll start flipping through it to find the M's, and then they'll start working through the letters. And then they've already done it. At that point you can stop them. The minute they do that, you can stop them. And they're like, what? Because of course, there are two ways of finding a word in a dictionary. One of them is to start at the very beginning, and I would do this. Start at the very beginning, find the first word. What a preamble for a dictionary. Look at all this. The dictionary doesn't even start until page... Well, it says page 1, but there's clearly more than no pages there. And you go, right, no, with a hyphen, no, aardvark, no, adback, no, abacus, no, abalone, no, abalone, sorry. Abandon, no, we'll probably just cut that. Abate, abattoir, abbey, and drag it on for as long as you feel necessary. I've rarely managed to get as far as that before I get groans. Or you can think to yourself, right, M is the middle letter of the alphabet, give or take, and so I'm going to split the dictionary roughly in half, because I know A through to L is going to be this side and M onwards is going to be that side, so I can eliminate all of that. M's actually further on. So then I can kind of cut out a decent chunk of the book before I even need to start then trying to work out, right, M-O, M-O-P, whatever the word was. I think I was going for mop. That's computational thinking. It's sort of a merge sort, and if you get onto algorithms talking about different kinds of sorts, it's quite good, because then you can get into having a line of plastic cups with a ball under it and having to eliminate certain parts of the line to find the ball and all stuff like that, or sorting things and seeing how quickly they can do it and that kind of stuff. There's lots of fun to be had with algorithms, which is a sentence no one's ever said. Point being, by virtue of the fact that they've come up and they've split the dictionary roughly in half to try and find the M's, they're demonstrating logical thinking. They already know there's no point looking through A through to L, because the word begins with M isn't going to be in there, unless it's a really crap dictionary. So you need to split it in half and find the M's and then start working from there. Which then leads us to our next activity. So you split the class into pairs. Each pair has like an A and a B, and the A's have to think of a number between 1 and 100, and obviously you can change the upper limit of that number depending on the ability of the group. Stipulate they can't have minus numbers, they can't have decimals, that sort of thing. They can't have like 42 and a half, that sort of thing, because that's just mean. Again, judge it on the class. And then B in each pair has to try and guess what that number is, and all they can do is ask specific numbers like 42, and all the other person can do is tell them whether that, obviously if that's right, or if it's higher or lower than their guess. So for instance, person A might think of the number 50, and person B might guess, is your number 85? And the other person will say, no, it's lower than that. And then they go, right, is it 62? No, it's lower than that. Is it 44? No, it's higher than that. And the challenge is to try and guess the other person's number in as few a number of guesses as possible. and you let them play it for 5 minutes or so, and then you let them swap around and really keep it going as long as you need to. It's quite a good starter. It's quite a good thing to have going on in the background when you're doing a register, that sort of thing. And when you judge that enough time has passed, obviously you've got a chance to go around and make sure they're doing it and make sure the ones who are struggling are okay and that kind of thing. Then when you've stopped them and you call them back, some of them invariably will have cottoned onto this and have done it in a very small number of guesses. Some. Again, it depends on the ability group or the ability of the group. And so then you talk to them about the same sort of thing. You're still doing a similar kind of sort. You're still thinking about the problem logically, and really it kind of leads on quite neatly from the dictionary task. And so what you say to them is, okay, well, let's sort of poll them for some ideas. What was your number? How many guesses did it take? What was your strategy for trying to work out? If somebody has cottoned on to what you're trying to do, obviously they're the ones that can reveal it to the rest of the class, so use them. If some of them are close, you can maybe try and elicit them to sort of go, well, what might have been a more efficient way of trying to work out what their number was. If they've said to you, if you guess, say you've got an upper limit of 100, between 1 and 100, whole numbers only, and they've guessed 60, and that's their number, and they've sort of said, oh, is it 40, and they've gone, no, it's higher than that. Clearly from that point on, you aren't going to guess anything lower than 40 because you already know it's higher than 40. So you're sort of shrinking down the parameters of what you're guessing. Then you can do the reveal. And the reveal, of course, is that you pick the halfway point. If the upper limit's 100, you say, is your number 50? And if they go, no, it's higher than that, then you can eliminate half of all the possible answers immediately. Then you guess, all right, so it's higher than 50. Is it 75? Because whichever side of 75 it falls, you're knocking the rest of those numbers in half again. So if they go, no, it's lower than 75, then you know it's somewhere between 50 and 75. You've eliminated quite a large number of the possible guesses. So then you pick the halfway point, the halfway point, the halfway point, as much as you can do for, depends whether it divides in half or not, with a whole number. And so that's the quickest, most efficient way of getting to the answer, regardless of what the upper limit is. The upper limit's 1,000, theoretically similar number of guesses to drill into it, because you're still halving the choices. And that's thinking about it logically. That's thinking about it like a computer would think about it. Now, all of those clearly are ways of looking at computational thinking that don't actually require computers, at all. You could use them. You could use B-bots or Spheros or any of these lovely toys. Educational tools, not toys. There's loads of different ways you could do it. These are things that I've used as an introduction. Broadly speaking, I haven't always had a lot of time to cover computational thinking. It's kind of had to be a lead-in to talking about algorithms, or a lead-in to an introduction to Python, or whatever it might be. If you're blessed enough to be able to have a whole hour on computational thinking, then there's all kinds of cool stuff that you could do, and I'm sure once you've thought about it, I've used Uno cards, the little things. We've played games with those that involve computational thinking. Just regular playing cards you could use. There's so much stuff you can do, but the take-home message from it has to be about logical thinking. It's about taking a problem and thinking, right, how am I going to tackle this? It's much more important that they understand what computational thinking is, they understand what logic is, and how to think logically, how to take a problem and tackle it from a kind of level-headed, logical way, to break a big problem down into smaller problems, to be able to express the solution to that problem to other people so they can solve it too. That's your algorithms. I think it's one of the more joyful elements of the computing curriculum, actually, because before you start to get bogged down in specific syntax and specific rules that different programming languages insist that you follow, whether that be indentation or putting colons in places and stuff like that, before you get into the nitty-gritty of it, before you lose them, you can still have fun.